Mr. President, after hearing my colleagues, Senator Charles Sinclair and Senator Samuda, following the comprehensive brief that was presented to us by our leader of government business, I didn't think it necessary to comment. My submissions today, however, are required because of the questions that have been posed by Senator Knight and by comments made by Senator Lambert Brown. And I think it is important for us to ensure that the country and all Jamaicans watching us are clear as to the government's approach and do not ever have to digest only one side of this story. Mr. President, I, in my submission at a previous instance, made it very clear that I appreciate very easily the challenges that the opposition and opponents have with regards to the extension and even the initial introduction of the state of emergency. I expressed then my own concern for extraordinary measures being implemented on a society. It is always a concern. What I did highlight, and I highlight again, is that this bold decision made by the government is not a frivolous decision. It is a decision which the government knows would place its own self into detriment politically. Particularly, Mr. President, when you consider the history of previous states of emergencies that have been implemented in this country. No government would want to go down this road. No Prime Minister would want to be placed in the position to make that decision. And personally, Mr. President, as I was then State Minister in the Ministry of National Security, I don't need to remind this House why I myself would have great caution supporting a state of emergency. But as a government, Mr. President, we made a promise, a commitment to the people of Jamaica that our decisions would not be politically motivated, but would be based on developing this country in a sustainable way. And Mr. President, when I hear comments from my colleagues, and I'm constrained because I know in the hustle of our debate, we will naturally oppose each other. But when it comes on to national security and the protection of our children, our men and women in this country, we must put certain things aside. Mr. President, we don't have time for the frivolous and sometimes inflammatory commentary that only emboldens criminals and makes the security forces who have asked for this feel disrespected. Mr. President, when we look on where we are as a country, there is no doubt that we are in circumstances that require extraordinary measures. Unless it is that you consider the murders, rapes, shootings, and other incidents to be normal. And I believe I am safe in saying that no senator in this House wishes for Jamaica to have even one murder a year. Mr. President, if we are to examine where we are moving from chaos to order. We are moving from chaos to order. And we must understand, Mr. President, that within that space, along that journey, we are going to contend with a lot of inconvenience. We are going to contend with the reality that, yes, we don't know yet in Jamaica where each and every one of our citizens are. That is why, Mr. President, this cannot be seen in isolation of all of the other significant elements that have been introduced by this government to be able to plan and to be able to put forward for our future strategies that will not just see 1 year result, but strategies that will see us able to reduce crime in a sustainable way, moving it step by step in the right direction. Mr. President, when I hear my colleagues, I am concerned because I know that we all appreciate that it's not a simple situation we are in. When we refer to the freedom of movement, Mr. President, and the restriction of freedom of movement to all, Mr. President, the persons, the residents, the community members in the communities where the state of emergency is instituted understand well the balance between their inconvenience and their life. And they have made a very, very clear statement to the country. We prefer our life. We prefer to have another day to live with our children and our wives and our husbands. That is what they're saying. Yes. And the government has said to them in response, we also appreciate and acknowledge that you must be treated with respect. So it's not a matter of saying security and no convenience. It's a matter of saying your security is more important, but we're going to respect you and we're going to give you professional service and we're going to give you a tribunal to ensure that if there is any one individual that carries out an act which is not reasonable, that there is always something in place to respect you. We're going to make sure that there's an allocation of more than ever before in the history of our country since independence, so that we can put in place the resources to ensure that while we implement these extraordinary measures, we try as best that we don't trample your convenience. But in all of this, Mr. President, the people have spoken and the government has responded in acknowledging that we have to move towards law and order. And in doing that, in a country where we have so many murders, Jamaica is known as one of the countries across the world with the highest violence. It is as if when I'm listening, it's like we're fooling ourselves. This is not a bed of roses. When the police officers speak to me one-on-one and say, Mr. Charles, when I have to beat my head around the corner, I hear an AK lick. When a citizen says to us, it's the first time since I have been born that I have ever slept with my window open. And this is a reality. This is not a joke. This is a reality. Again, unlike many persons, I said it before. All my colleagues will remember. I made an invitation. I said, join me on the ground. Let us go from door to door, gate to gate, and ask the questions. Hear the comments. Get the hugs. Yes, yes, people will say, my son has been detained. But the same son will come out and say, I was detained for a while, and the reality is, it was inconvenient, but I am home and I am alive. And I am not in fear of being killed tomorrow. Mr. President, you know, my good friend, and one of the leading counsel in Montego Bay, Senator Charles Sinclair, reminded me, and I don't want to call the name of the person, lest I call it wrong, but a popular artist from that area, out of Montego Bay, who was detained himself, had this to say about the state of emergency. Is the best thing for Montego Bay right now. At least nobody now lose their life. An artist said that. The place well locked down early, but we can't complain because the violence is less, and that is the greatest thing. And the violence can get lesser too. Mr. President, we appreciate that there is inconvenience, but the people have spoken. When I hear my colleagues get up and act as if we are walking through some kind of bed of roses, I am concerned. Am I in the same Jamaica? Am I turning on the same news? Am I reading the same statistics? Are we all considering the gravity of the impact of a murder on a daughter and a son? You know, Mr. President, I made an oath to myself that I would try my best to present unity when it comes on to national security. But I must tell you, it becomes more difficult when I hear utterances from my colleague like, why did you make it reach there? We could go back to the statistics. We could... Mr. President, you know, I don't want to turn my submissions into a retort and going back into a historical perspective of the crime and the violence. I think that my colleagues before me have done a significant job in that regard. But I tell you this, that the young people and the Jamaicans who are watching us right now are holding us to account for every utterance that we make. They are not fools. They understand well that the government is in an uncomfortable position. Do you think we would rather not spend that money on more construction if it would be possible? But the reality, Mr. President, is that the movement to introduce these enhanced security measures is a part and parcel of the government's strategic plan to grow the country. When you have a murder, it impacts not only the loss of life, the psychological, the emotional, the impact on the families, the investors, the diaspora who look on in fear. Mr. President, when the diaspora who I am interacting with now speak to myself and to Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, they say to us, we are moving home. We are looking towards Jamaica for investment because we see the government taking sensible decisions and we see the results. When they look on the fact that there's been a 67% reduction in murder, a 53% reduction in shooting in this area, they are not looking on it with orange or green eyes. They are looking on it with clear Jamaican eyes. And they're very happy to see that as a country, we have made hard decisions. Because for a long time, Mr. President, our problem has been that we don't make the decisions that move our country forward because they hold us back politically. Governments are scared to take positions because the positions that they take may have some kind of detriment on their ability to retain power. That's the reality. And when one government is doing something that makes sense, it becomes now the obligation of the opposition to find any way to chop it down, even if they agree with it. Both sides. Both sides. Both sides. I'm talking openly and honestly. Mr. President, what happens in this country and in this house is that we say we support you, but we do everything to make sure that the support is so whittled and so deteriorated, in my view. Mr. President, as I said before, security is inconvenient by nature. Security is inconvenient by nature. Even the fact that we have to, Mr. President, whenever I speak, there's a lot of rumbling because I make people clearly uncomfortable. And I don't know if I'm hearing my colleagues. Well, I said, I'm speaking directly to you, Mr. President, and I find that I wouldn't want to be. Well, I tell you, on the point of distraction, while I heard my colleague, again, lead counsel from Montego Bay, Senator Charles Sinclair, speak about a comment made by former Prime Minister about, what was it? Sucking salt through a wooden spoon? I Googled it to confirm. And I tell you something. Shock and dismay at some of the commentary of citizens who were disgusted, who defined it as an effort to distract. And Mr. President, the reality is that this is what is happening to us. As we move in the right direction, there is always going to be an effort to distract, and we must do what I am doing now. Speak louder than those that are trying to distract us. Keep our eyes on the prize and move Jamaica from poverty to prosperity. That is what we must do. If they want to talk, we talk louder. If they want to distract, we keep ourselves focused. That is what we have to do. Because the people in St. James have spoken. They continue to say it. We are safer. We are safer now. And let us remember, when we attack the effort to extend the state of emergency, you're not attacking Andrew Holness. You're not attacking Pearnel Charles Jr. You're attacking the JCF and the JDF and community members. Because they are the persons who have said to us, the experts who have analyzed the scenario and advised the Most Honorable Andrew Michael Holness, the chairman of the National Security Council, that this is the best step to keep Jamaica safe. So don't feel you're attacking me and attacking Senator Corinthia Morrison. You're attacking the JCF and JDF. I never forget when Senator Morrison spoke about the extension in Spanish Town. It's like the words etched in my brain. Don't they deserve it? Don't they deserve the best? Don't they deserve every single police and soldier that is out there? What if it was your home? Mr. President, as I was saying when I was distracted, security is inconvenient by nature. And I read, when you think, and I'm going to tell you, let's take a gated community, as Senator Crawford is saying. When you think about the spaces that we live in, I need a gavel. I need a gavel. What is going on when minister talking? What's happening? You're a teacher. Tell a student to be quiet. Mr. President, as I said for the third time, security is inconvenient by nature. And as Senator Crawford said, when you take even a gated community, because that wasn't security, that was abuse. That is abuse. I'm glad you bring it up. You're really brave to come bring up that. You're really brave to come bring up 1976. You're really brave to bring up the abuse of the people in Jamaica, unwarranted lockup. You haven't even said apologize for the state of emergency yet. You and the government of 1976 must apologize. You're brave. Don't get me started in there. You shouldn't get me started in there. As I say for the fourth time, security is inconvenient by nature.
Without cause, and that is what Senator Knight was operating. Of course. Read the regulation.
Mr. President, I allow my colleague time to speak. He needs to hear himself. Security is inconvenient by nature. Fifth time that I'm saying it. I thank him for the repeat. Mr. President, I was saying to you, when it appears I have enlightened.
What you're doing, number of man experience like to make matches draw out.
Yes. As I said, Mr. President, I am going to take the analogy that was just put in my mind by my good friend. And, you know, when you take even the security gate at your gated apartment, it would, at Senator Brown's gated apartment, it would be convenient if you never had no gate, wouldn't it? And you could just drive in. But the reality is, you need a gate to stop people from roaming into the place, if it's even to stop animals from roaming in there. But furthermore, in Jamaica, it's not just a gate. You have to have a lock on the gate. Because even when you have a lock, somebody will come and push your gate. And even when you have a gate and you have a lock on the gate, you have to have a security by the gate that has a lock. Because a man will come and pick your lock. And all when you have a gate and a lock and a security by the gate with the lock, you have to have cameras to watch the security so him don't pick your lock and let in a man. Mr. President, this is the scenario we are in. We are not in a circumstance where we can afford ourselves to just go along like everything is normal. And so as we move to that place of understanding, and I know Jamaica's hearing me, and I know Jamaica has heard us, and that they appreciate it. Mr. President, as I said, we're moving from chaos to order. And as we do so, we look even on what Senator Knight has said in relation to locking up. Matter of fact, the word that has been used is scraping up without cause. What can, if you could never have a more inflammatory, and he repeated it from Senator Brown. Yes. What an inflammatory way of designating what our professional security forces have been attempting to do in this country. Disrespect. I find it to be completely disrespectful. Don't worry where my head going. Don't worry about my head. Worry about Skeffrey head. Don't refer to my head. Mr. President, I appreciate that. I appreciate that recommendation. I appreciate that recommendation. It's not friend enough, so can talk. Mr. President, when I look on Section 30, to which we are referring, let me read it. An authorized person may arrest without a warrant and detain pending inquiries any person whose behavior is of such a nature as to give reasonable grounds for suspecting. Reasonable grounds. Reasonable grounds. Mr. President, there has been a consistent effort. Mr. President, I don't often ask for your intervention. But following the wisdom of Senator Skeffrey, who has just mentioned to me, and I agree with him, could it be possible for me to make my submissions without being badgered? Thank you. As we refer to Section 30, what it says when you read it is that it is unfair to suggest that the regulations or the legislation or the actions are such that it is scraping up people without cause. Matter of fact, when the essential part of it, Senator Crawford, is of such a nature as to give reasonable grounds. Reasonable grounds. Now, I don't think that any of us would say that you don't have a circumstance or cannot have a circumstance where somebody acts outside of those reasonable grounds. That will happen. And I think that is why it contemplates that if there is such an individual that carries out an action that cannot be properly defined as within the section, then once the person goes to the police station, you have a superior officer who would be the first point of contact and review. And in addition to that, as was made clear by my colleague, you have a tribunal that has been put in place to have further access to review of the circumstances. Not to mention that it does not eliminate the person's ability to utilize the habeas corpus application. So what I've defined right there, Mr. President, is 3 circumstances where someone can avail themselves of review of the interpretation of the legislation. So for us to posit, opine, or to make any articulation or say that there is scraping up of 1,000 people without cause can be nothing but misleading. And it must be clarified. Mr. President, if we make those comments, those unjustified utterances, And the police and soldiers who are out there sweating, the same police who Senator Crawford will soon get up and say need more pay. The same police who Senator Crawford will soon get up and say need more, they shouldn't be out there so long. The same police who Senator Crawford going to get up and say he wants to help. And they're making those comments about them. You don't have to talk again. You don't have to talk again. Mr. President, I want to... Really?
Having expired, Mr. President, may be extended to allow him to complete his presentation.
The question is that Senator Charles be allowed to continue his presentation. Those in favor? Those against, the ayes have it. Senator Charles.
I am grateful, my colleagues. Mr. President, I want to, as I wind down, make reference to, very importantly, Mr. President, you know, the price of murder is way too high. It is not only as it relates to the enormous hospitalist expense and impact on the Ministry of Health and our entire health sector, but it is every time you need an investigator to go on the road and gas to move that van to that place and human capital to be placed into an investigation and prosecutors to be utilized and judges and courtroom. It is the impact on the children and the parents and the community members who now believe it is normal. It is the little boy and the little girl like my children who turn on the TV and by chance happen upon the news and say, but daddy, why are you going out? Please don't go out because you will get shot. These things have a significant impact and restraint on our development individually, personally, professionally, and as a nation. So, Mr. President, when we talk about a 67% reduction in murder, we are nowhere near where we should be. Not close. But what we are doing is moving the country, transitioning from chaos to order, from poverty to prosperity, moving in the right direction. Mr. President, I want to close by just reiterating my concern and registering it for the Hansard, my concern with regards to what I believe are frivolous and inflammatory comments that are made. And I hasten to say, I believe in democracy. I believe that the opposition and opponents must get up and say what they consider to be their opinion. I believe that the only way for the government to be checked is to have a strong opposition. But I also, Mr. President, know that when we repeat things, even after they have been asked and answered, it no longer is opponents trying to put forward an argument. It begins, in my mind, to crystallize as detractors trying to tear down your mission. I've given you my opinion. I've given you my respectful opinion. And as Senator Scott Motley said, the people not only will judge, the people have judged. That is why we are the government. And that is why we now have the responsibility as the leaders of this country to make sure that we make bold, smart, sensible decisions. That is what we are doing. And I tell you, Mr. President, you know, I think my concern is justified. Because the first time I spoke on this issue. It will be remembered. Matter of fact, when I came down, when I left Senate, Mr. President, my cousin, who is one of the strongest members of the opposition, and he's a white cousin, called me and said, boy, I like your submission. You were so fair and balanced. And once you hear that, you know, I wasn't attacking the opposition. I wasn't attacking the position. Matter of fact, even Senator Brown said this, and you're being fair and balanced. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I made those comments at that time. Upon the introduction of the state of emergency, we all, every one of us, were concerned, but we are hopeful. Matter of fact, I remember the leader of government business, the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, making comments clear as day. She repeated it so many times, that we as a government are trying to ensure that as the state of emergency is rolled out, it is professional. I remember her talking about training being done. I remember her talking about all of the things being put in place to make sure that we are respecting the human rights of the citizens. Senator Reid, you remember? So at that time, I was in all right to say what I said then. I respect the concern of the opposition. I understand your challenge. I appreciate it. But now, Senator Longmore, now that we have not only hypothetically discussed the state of emergency, but we have the statistics before us to prove that it works, and it is working not only in the space, but it is causing a national decrease in murders. What are we fighting against? We are sending the wrong message to the country. And I'm not talking about every comment made. Some comments, I appreciate it. But the comments that are frivolous and those that are inflammatory, I believe we must stop it. Stop it. They are only going to serve to demotivate those who are on the front line of this battle. Stop it. Mr. President, I close by saying that Senator Brown made a few comments. And Senator Matthew Samuda spoke to the issue relating to the consultants. And I just want to indicate, Mr. President, as someone who was also integral in the implementation of the Jamaica Eye, I would never want there to be any contamination of that project in the eyes of the public. And I know that there are almost 500, I think it's more than 400 for sure, cameras being installed right now, and that the ministry had some delays in relation to infrastructure implementation, but that they are moving forward with top quality products that are going forward. So, Mr. President, again, when we try, in closing, Mr. President, in closing, when we put forward statements in this upper house, and I say upper house, I distinguish it because the history of the Senate has been one, whereas a review chamber, our utterances, our submissions, our analysis and review is always to be seen as more distinct. And when we make certain comments, it impacts the capacity and ability for the civil servants who work in the Ministry of National Security to continue to serve well. You're not attacking the government. We're not in high school throwing words after each other. And the cleaning windows. We are leaders of Jamaica with a responsibility. And I hasten again to say, in relation to those inflammatory and frivolous comments, stop it.